It was an unusually quiet evening when Anna and Mark arrived at the new apartment. The city had been a blurry smear of gray rain and blurred lights as they drove in, but as soon as they stepped inside the building, everything felt still, the sort of stillness that hums behind the ears, the kind that feels too deliberate. They'd been looking for months. Prices had climbed beyond anything reasonable, and the places within their budget were either laughably small or so damaged they felt like they'd crumble under a strong breeze. This apartment, though, had appeared like a gift, an online listing with fuzzy photos, no virtual tour, and no open house. But the rent was low, unbelievably low, and the location was central. It almost didn't feel real. The landlord, a pale man named Mr. Hill, had met them at the door. He was polite, though something about his eyes never quite settled. He walked with a slight limp, dragging one foot behind him like a forgotten burden, but he never mentioned it. He'd shown them around the unit briefly, barely speaking, mostly pointing with an extended finger. It wasn't much, just a living room with sun-warped blinds, a kitchen that smelled faintly of bleach and old onions, a narrow bathroom, and a single bedroom. The walls were discolored with age, and the floor creaked like it remembered every past tenant. Still, it was better than what they'd seen elsewhere. Much better. Anna had felt strange from the beginning. The air seemed heavy, like they were underwater. Every corner of the apartment looked slightly darker than it should have been, and the windows didn't let in as much light as expected. But they were tired. They signed the lease the next morning. Their first few days were consumed by unpacking, sorting, and trying to adjust. The building was oddly silent. No neighbors introducing themselves, no footsteps above them, no sounds of doors slamming or televisions humming. It was as if they were the only ones alive in the whole place. Even the street noise barely seeped in, muffled like someone had thrown a thick woolen blanket over the world outside. By the third night, the knocking began. It was subtle at first, just a soft tap beneath their feet in the living room. It came at irregular intervals, always when they were still, always in moments of silence. Anna was the first to notice it. At first, she thought it was the old plumbing, or maybe the building settling, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Tap, tap, pause, tap. She mentioned it to Mark, who waved it off. He said it was probably the heating system. But that night, when they were watching a movie, the knocking returned, louder now, and closer, like knuckles on hollow wood just below the floorboards. The knocking stopped when Mark muted the TV and sat still. It didn't come again that night. The next morning, Anna noticed something strange in the corner of the living room. A splinter of wood curled up from between two floorboards, delicate as a ribbon. She leaned down and ran her finger over it. The edges were sharp. Beneath the floor, there was darkness, complete and total black, even in the morning sun. She thought about lifting the board, but didn't. Something about the gap made her stomach turn. Later that day, Mark tried to contact the landlord. The call went to voicemail, and the message was clipped and garbled, just static and the end of a sentence, something about "don't go down." He left a message anyway, mentioning the knocking. There was no call back. That night, the knocking came again, louder, longer. They were sitting at the small dining table, eating in silence, when it started. It didn't sound random anymore. It sounded curious, like something trying to find the right place to hit. Anna froze with her fork halfway to her mouth, her knuckles whitening. Mark didn't speak. They just listened. Then it stopped. But it came back 2 hours later, just before they went to bed. A dragging sound followed this time, like nails or fingertips scraping slowly across wood. It came from the hallway between the bedroom and bathroom. It stopped as soon as Mark turned on the lights. Neither of them slept well. The apartment groaned all night. By the end of the week, they were both on edge. Anna had started keeping all the lights on. She hated walking barefoot, hated the feel of the wood under her soles. Something about the floor felt wrong, like it was listening, watching. They heard the knocking every night, sometimes once, sometimes for hours. And it had started following them. They'd hear it under the bathroom tiles when brushing their teeth, under the bed when they lay down, in the kitchen while the coffee brewed. One evening, Anna couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed a flashlight and got on her hands and knees in the living room, examining the boards. She found several that looked newer than the others. Darker wood, smoother polish. They weren't fixed in the same way either. No nails, just fit snugly into place like they had something to hide. She didn't tell Mark what she was doing. He was in the bedroom trying to sleep off a headache. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed at the edge of one board. It lifted without resistance. Beneath it was not concrete or insulation, just a hollow, yawning space. The flashlight's beam fell into it like a drop of water swallowed by a well. She couldn't see the bottom. That night, the knocking didn't stop. It came in waves, shaking the floor so hard the picture frames on the wall tilted. There were no patterns now, just urgent, angry pounding. Mark sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, even though the sound came from below. He looked pale. Anna curled into a ball, clutching her legs to her chest. They didn't speak. When the sun came up, the noise stopped. They packed a bag the next morning. Anna wanted to leave, even just for a night. Mark hesitated, but the look on her face made him agree. They stayed at a hotel across town. It was noisy and overpriced, but it felt safer. They returned the following afternoon. The apartment looked the same, but colder. The lights didn't seem to reach the corners. The air smelled sour. They didn't hear any knocking that night, but they didn't sleep either. In the morning, Anna went to take a shower and found muddy footprints leading from the bathroom drain to the hallway. She didn't scream. She just walked back to the bedroom, pale and silent, and started packing. Mark went down to the lobby to speak to Mr. Hill. This time, the landlord answered the knock on his office door. His face was pale and wet with sweat. He didn't look surprised when Mark mentioned the knocking. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at Mark for a long time and said one thing, then closed the door. Anna didn't ask what he'd said. Mark didn't tell her. They decided to give it one more night, but they didn't unpack. They would leave the next morning for good. The knocking came back just after midnight. This time, it didn't stop. It moved, fast, angry, desperate. It followed them from room to room. The lights flickered. The air grew thick and humid. Anna sobbed into her hands, and Mark stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the floor beneath him like it might erupt. Then the boards began to bow. They swelled upward in the living room, each one flexing as though pushed from below. Nails popped up with sharp metallic pings, one after another. The floor seemed to breathe. Something was rising. Anna grabbed her bag. Mark moved toward her, but the hallway floor caved inward beneath him just slightly. A crack split down the wood. The knocking was inside now, not under. It echoed in their heads. A terrible rhythmic sound like something learning to walk. Neither of them spoke. They stood in silence as the apartment darkened around them, and the floor moved like it had a heartbeat. The splinters rose again. The boards creaked open like a mouth, and something waited just below, and then without a sound, the floor stopped moving. The apartment was still. They didn't sleep. They just waited for morning. The moment the sun rose, they left everything behind. The keys, the lease, their clothes. They didn't even lock the door. But as they walked out to the car, Anna paused on the sidewalk and looked back. Just once. Just for a second. And from the apartment window in the shadowed living room, she swore she saw the floor ripple like something waving goodbye. They didn't speak during the drive. The car cut through the morning haze like a knife through gauze, city blocks peeling past them without meaning. Anna stared out the window, numb, eyes wide but unfocused. Mark gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his jaw tight, his thoughts spiraling into silence. The farther they got from the apartment, the more unreal it felt, like they'd stepped out of a nightmare that didn't belong to them, but it followed. The feeling, the pressure, the weight behind their ribs. It didn't lessen with distance. It clung to them like humidity on the skin. There was no relief in the sunlit streets, no comfort in the open sky. Something had changed. Something had opened. They checked into another hotel, farther away this time. Anna sat on the bed, motionless, for hours. Mark tried to distract himself with the TV, then his phone, then coffee, but nothing helped. His ears buzzed with a phantom noise, like knocking muffled by water. He could still feel the vibration in his feet. That evening, he stepped out for air and found himself dialing the landlord again. Mr. Hill answered after the second ring. Mark didn't remember what he said. He only remembered the voice on the other end. Calm, distant, hollow. "You're on the ground floor," Mr. Hill said. Mark froze. What? The voice didn't repeat itself. It only said again, "You're on the ground floor?" And then the line went dead. Mark stood there, staring at the phone in his hand, heart slamming against his chest. He felt dizzy, unmoored. He'd never even thought about it. They'd entered from the street, hadn't they? Or had they? The building's layout had never made much sense. No elevators, no stairwell markings, no mailboxes. Had there even been other tenants? He returned to the hotel room, the words repeating in his head like a looped whisper. Anna looked up at him when he entered, her expression hollow. "We're on the ground floor," he said aloud, and hearing it made it worse. She didn't respond. She just looked down, then slowly reached for her phone and opened the photo gallery. She swiped through a few pictures of the apartment, boxes half unpacked, Mark laughing with a beer, sunlight slanting in through the living room blinds. Then she stopped. She held the phone out to him. The photo showed the window in their bedroom. Nothing outside, just black, no street, no alley, no fire escape, just endless darkness like an abyss pressed against the glass. He stared at it for a long time, trying to remember what had been there. A tree? A courtyard? He couldn't. And suddenly, he wasn't sure there had ever been anything out there. They slept with the lights on again that night. The hotel room was silent, but neither trusted it. The knocking didn't come, but it was inside them now. Not a sound, but a presence, like someone or something was waiting. By the next morning, Anna had made up her mind. "I need to go back," she said. Mark stared at her like she was insane, but something in her eyes stopped him from arguing. It wasn't fear, it was resignation, a recognition of something inevitable, like she knew they hadn't left anything behind because they'd brought it with them. They returned to the building that afternoon. It looked the same. Old, quiet, office. The front door was ajar. Anna stepped inside first. Her body was tense, like a wire drawn taut. The hallway was dimmer than before. The lights flickered above them, giving off a soft, buzzing sound that felt too loud in the silence. The apartment door stood closed but unlocked. Inside, everything was untouched. Their half-unpacked boxes, the bed still unmade, the kitchen light flicking in and out like a dashing firefly. The air was heavier than before. It smelled like earth, like wet wood, like something rotting in the walls. Mark moved toward the living room and froze. The boards were warped now, bowed and misshapen, like something had pressed against them from below. Several nails had popped completely free and lay scattered across the floor like discarded teeth. In the corner, the floorboard Anna had lifted still sat ajar. The black gap yawned beneath it, wider now, almost inviting. Anna stood over it and knelt again, flashlight in hand. She didn't say anything, just shone the light down into the dark. This time, there was something. Movement. Slow, subtle, like something shifting far below the surface. She stared for a long time, then turned the flashlight off and stood. Mark didn't ask what she saw. Instead, he walked to the window and pulled the blinds. The street outside looked wrong. The angles didn't make sense. Buildings stood too close, pressed together like cardboard cutouts. The light didn't reach the sidewalk. It bent strangely at the corners. It was like looking at a stage set. Artificial, hollow. They spent the night in the apartment. They didn't plan to, but when evening came, the air turned thick again. The door wouldn't open, not the front, not the bedroom, not even the bathroom. Every knob was locked. The windows wouldn't budge. And then the knocking returned. It was constant now, faster, angry. It moved beneath them like a storm, hitting the boards from every angle. The floor swelled and dipped with the impact. The lights went out. The walls trembled. They backed into the living room, eyes wide in the dark. Mark reached for his phone. No signal, no time. The boards beneath their feet creaked and groaned as though soaked in water. Anna held his hand. She was shaking. Then came a voice, not aloud, not in the room, but inside them, behind the eyes. A low, thick whisper, no words, just the sense of something waking, watching, waiting. The floor cracked. The wood split like ice beneath pressure. Boards popped free with loud, wet snaps. A gap opened in the center of the room, wider than before. Not a tunnel, not a basement, a mouth, teeth. They were wood at first, then not, shifting, breathing. The gap pulsed with heat and sound. From inside, a wet clicking noise echoed upward like bones clattering in rhythm. Anna screamed. Mark pulled her back as the floor buckled. A long, spindly hand reached through the gap. Fingers too long, too many joints. The skin was pale gray and stretched thin like paper. It scrabbled at the boards, feeling for something, finding nothing. Then it stopped, pulled back. Silence. Mark moved forward without thinking. He shone the flashlight into the hole and saw nothing, not darkness, not shadow, nothing, an endless absence, a void with depth, a hunger. He dropped the flashlight. It never hit bottom. The mouth closed. The boards knit themselves together, slowly creaking as they settled into place. The nails rolled back into the corners. The warped wood flattened. The room went still. They didn't sleep. They just sat, watched, waited. In the morning, the door opened again. The light outside was gray, empty. They didn't leave this time. They went to Mr. Hill. He answered on the first knock. No expression, no surprise. "You're on the ground floor," he said again. But now they understood. They weren't above anything. Nothing was below them. They were within it. Mr. Hill opened the door wider. Behind him, the hallway stretched too far, too deep. No end, no beginning, just repetition. Rooms stacked on rooms, floors upon floors. Everyone the ground floor, everyone the same. Anna looked at Mark. Mark looked at Anna, and they stepped inside. There was no sound but the soft thud of the door closing behind them. And beneath it all, far below or far above or nowhere at all, the knocking began again. They walked into the hallway behind Mr. Hill, and the door closed with a sound that echoed too long. The walls breathed, not metaphorically. Mark saw them expand and contract like lungs. The wallpaper peeled in rhythmic sighs. Anna didn't look at him. She only moved forward, drawn. The corridor bent in strange ways. It sloped downward, but subtly. The overhead lights buzzed in patterns. Some flickered in sync with their footsteps. Others dimmed when passed, glowing red at the edges. There were doorways on either side, hundreds of them, none marked. Some were open, revealing empty rooms filled with old furniture or standing water. Others remained shut, sealed with rusted chains or wooden planks. One had dozens of nails driven into the wood in the shape of an open eye. Mark tried to keep track of how far they'd walked, but time felt stretched. Hours may have passed, or minutes. It didn't matter. There were no windows, no clocks, no sense of reality as they'd known it. The floor changed beneath them, hardwood giving way to dirt, then to stone, then to something soft, spongy, and breathing. At one point, Anna stepped in a puddle that rippled for too long. The walls started to change too. They pulsed with veins. Some doors bled when passed. Others whispered. And always beneath everything, the knocking. It no longer sounded like it came from beneath them. It was beside them, ahead of them, inside the walls, inside their heads. It grew louder when they hesitated, softer when they moved forward. Mr. Hill never looked back. When he finally stopped, it was in front of a door, unlike the others. This one wasn't made of wood or metal. It looked organic, like a thick membrane stretched across a circular frame. Something twitched behind it, reacting to their presence. Mr. Hill pressed his hand to the surface, and it parted for him, peeling back with a wet sound. He turned to them, his pale eyes shining with something between pity and expectation, and stepped through. Anna followed first. Mark hesitated. The knocking behind him grew louder, then sharper, then screaming. He went in. The room beyond was cathedral-like in size, but there were no windows, no altar, no holy light. The walls were made of interlocking bones. Skulls formed archways. Ribs held up a ceiling that dripped something black. In the center, a vast pit rimmed with teeth, wooden, stone, flesh, all fused. It pulsed. It breathed. The floor shook with each exhale. Mark felt his knees buckle. Anna didn't seem afraid anymore. She approached the pit as if in a trance. The air was thick with the scent of soil, rot, blood, and something ancient. Something holy in a way that had nothing to do with God's. Inside the pit, movement, shapes, a mass of limbs and eyes, shifting constantly. Arms reached upward, thin and long, too many fingers, no skin. They waved gently as though underwater. Something began to rise, not fast, not sudden, just inevitable. A shape emerged from the pit, tall, faceless, robed in layers of writhing black threads that moved on their own. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth expanse where a face should be. Its presence filled the room. The knocking stopped. Mark could not look away. Every nerve screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The door was gone. Only the room remained. The faceless thing raised one elongated arm and pointed at Anna. She stepped forward. Her skin began to peel away, slowly, like paper, curling in flame. But she didn't scream. Her eyes remained wide, unblinking, fixed on the thing before her. She kept walking as flesh fell in ribbons. Her muscles glistened, steaming in the cold air of the chamber. Then bone showed, then none. She never reached the bottom. Her body collapsed mid-step, crumbling into nothing, absorbed into the floor, into the pit. Mark screamed, or thought he did. No sound came, only silence. The thing turned to him, and something inside Mark cracked. Not his mind, his understanding. The entire world he'd known shifted sideways. He saw layers he wasn't meant to. Hallways folding in on themselves, rooms stacked in impossible configurations. Time reversed, repeated, folded again. Every tenant who had ever lived in the building screaming into floors that no longer existed. The thing spoke, not in words, but with memory. Mark saw his own life laid bare, every moment of pain, every whisper in the dark, every breath he had taken in fear or longing or rage. They were not his alone. They had been taken, fed, consumed. The apartment had never been a place. It was a mouth, and he had been inside it. The robed shape lifted both arms now. Mark felt the floor open beneath him. But instead of falling, he rose. He was no longer in his body. He was smoke, then ash, then thought, then nothing, and then someone else. When Mark opened his eyes again, he was standing in the lobby of the building. It looked normal, clean, bright. A light rain tapped against the windows. Mr. Hill stood behind the counter, smiling faintly. Mark looked down at his hands. They were his hands, but not. Younger, paler, someone else. A knock came from the front door. A couple stepped inside, laughing, carrying boxes. They looked around, confused. Mark turned toward them and smiled. He opened his mouth and heard someone else's voice say, "Let me show you the unit." The building hummed softly. The couple followed him. Above them, floorboards creaked. Somewhere deep, the knocking resumed.